What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic.
I'm Jammin, John.
And we have an album review for you, and I don't think I even need to say how anticipated this one was, because the hype around this band and this album has been substantial. We are going to go over the long-awaited new full-length from Blood Incantation, Absolute Elsewhere. This comes out on the 4th of October on Century Media Records. This band formed in 2011 in Denver, Colorado. This is their third full-length overall. I've been a fan since their debut full-length Starspawn. That album absolutely blew me away. Later, we actually reviewed Hidden History of the Human Race, which was a year-ender for us.
Yes.
And then we even went over their Time Wave Zero EP, which irritated a lot of fans. I knew what to expect, but some people were like, no, it was supposed to be metal. Look at their logo. And for those that don't know by now, this is some cosmos expanding death metal, bordering on progressive death metal. This band keeps evolving their sound with every album. And needless to say, this album was, again, very hyped up. And I mean, I get it. I think the expectations were super high. Their Luminous Bridge EP or single, whatever the hell they wanted to call that, was pretty damn cool. And I feel like that was a good teaser for what was to come. And dude, bar none, if this album didn't pry open my cosmic third eye and make me be able to, like, you know, project my consciousness across the universe, I was going to be disappointed. But I'm not.
Yeah, I wasn't disappointed either. I got into these guys with Hidden History of the Human Race, and that record was killer. And then, of course, I went back and listened to Starspawn, and that record was killer. This band are so good at what they do. I'm certain my third eye was pried open. I saved a nice fatty a White Widow for this, and it was worth every moment.
I would even say that this band is so good at what they do that it irritates people. I've constantly heard people say, oh, they're hipster death metal. I'm like, I don't even know what the fuck that is.
I don't either. Get out of here.
Yeah, whatever. But this album, again, with all the hype around it, the expectations were high, and I have to say, they met their expectations, possibly exceeded it in some fashions, because, man, this might be their best album yet.
We kind of knew what we were getting into here, considering the first track that they released was actually separated into 3 parts and was over 20 minutes long and had a really weird fucking video to it that was equally awesome. I mean, it just kind of, I don't know, set the stage for this album.
And this album, I mean, it is 100% Blood Incantation, but it's definitely an expanse. Like, take what they did on Luminous Bridge and even what they did on Time Wave Zero and merge it with the 2 previous albums.
Yeah.
And you kind of have this one. Baseline, this album, I would say, kind of takes 70s prog rock structure, but adds it to death metal and plays on both styles. Like, there are elements, of course, of what they usually do, like, you know, fierce, morbid angel worship, dingy, awesome, angular riffs, cool dive bomb leads, cavernous vocals, the stuff that you've come to expect from this band. But also, with this band, just kind of expect the unexpected, which would be these huge, clean prog sections, and man, the synth work on here is amazing. The first track, or first 3 tracks, technically, I guess, the Stargate. This is the one they shot the weird video for. It's amazing. Like, it starts off with, like, knights fighting, and then there's aliens, and everyone has, like, a weird adapter attached to them. Like, the band plugs in, and there's people banging their heads on rocks and playing stick. I don't know what is going on. I feel like that was a trip to the woods, and there was like large bags of fungus, and then like, yeah, just pointing. We'll figure out the rest of it in editing.
That's actually pretty spot on.
You know what? Like, hey, that's maybe the way to do something like this, because it kicks off with like this synth pulse, and then it is just headlong into these dissonant, ugly riffs. And you're kind of getting locked into this whole mode. Like, it's heavy. It's, again, like something you totally expect from this band. It's got a lot of, like, incantation vibes, too. It sounds sinister. And then it drops out, and all of a sudden, you have clean guitars, this really cool swingy drum pattern with a delayed kind of, like, snare hit. It opens up into Pink Floyd's Animals.
Yeah.
Essentially.
That jam that's in there is a sight to behold. It is groovy, it is funky, and you get these big lush synths playing all the time too, and like a pulsating bass that goes with it. So it makes even the quieter moments still really hypnotic.
Yeah, there is like almost like a trance-like state in certain parts of this where it kind of just locks on a more atmospheric thing, and then kind of just like throws a melody on top of it or a lead. Like there's a synth lead that comes in that is so ferociously Rick Wakeman, like that synth lead came in wearing a cape. It's that Rick Wakeman. It's amazing sounding. It is lush. It has that warm analog like Moog sound to it. And then after that comes in this very soaring but very bluesy lead that is 100% like David Gilmour.
It is. You can't escape it. That was the very first thing I thought of. And it's very well done. All the leads in this record are very well done. But these songs like to ebb and flow, all of them. There's just a constant vibe of going into space and then straight into Cthulhu's many tentacles, where you're ripped out of the spaceship, disemboweled, and thrown into space. And that's kind of what happens directly after that jam. Just goes straight into like an atheist-style death metal groove.
There is a lot of like interesting contrasting melodies on here. And again, like the swings between like the progressive sections, the ambient sections, to the full-on death metal sections, or just like full-on metal sections, because there's flat out thrash metal on here too. There's some like more brutal sections that are a little bit heavier, like kind of towards like Dying Fetus chugs. But it's those transitions between the two. Like it sounds like two bands occupying the same space and kind of doing an ebb and flow. Like one band comes in with all their love of like Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Rush and stuff like that, and the next one's like, nah man, I want some like monstrosity in here too. And they find a way to segue in and out of those moments. And it's done so smoothly on here. Like every track on here flows really well. And the movements are a great way to break this up. Honestly, I was kind of unsure about like, all right, we've got like 2 tracks over 20 minutes in terms of me like, you know, jamming on the car. I was like, all right, that's like 2 or 3 trips back to the grocery store in order for me to finish this. And I have to say, the middle part of each one of these songs, which is Stargate and The Message, those are probably the most kind of off the grid ones. Tablet 2 of the Stargate is maybe a little bit more familiar, especially if you liked Time Wave Zero. You were like one of the few that weren't pissed off by that album.
One of like the 12 of us that really loved it.
We heard from you. We also heard from the people that didn't like it. Anyway, that middle section, well, I mean, we compared Time Wave Zero to Tangerine Dream quite a bit, if I remember right. Well, you know what? They kind of one-upped us, and they actually got one of the main guys from Tangerine Dream to do this section, and it is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's beautiful, actually, and not necessarily in a bright, pretty way. It still harkens to being in the dark, but like little flecks of sunlight in the distance.
I mean, I think I compared Time Wave Zero, like one of the tracks on there, to like the slow establishing shot of a ship passing by. Like you want to get like every moment show it from different angles. Like, yes, this ship is fucking huge. It's kind of like that, but it's interesting how it builds into like Blood Incantation again. And it's interesting how they do it because it's a slow build. Like you have this sequencer sort of pulse in the beginning, like do-do-do-do-do-do. And they build these lush melodies on top of it. Slowly over time, you start hearing acoustic guitars, and then there's like a little bit of like a cymbal accent, and then the song kind of spirals into these just twisting death metal riffs, and that kicks off Tablet 3, which is pretty much the score of a giant Lovecraftian deity devouring the planet whole throughout the course of that like almost 7-minute song. It is devouring all life. It is destroying it. It is one of the heaviest tracks on here in terms of just like across the board. It is vicious, lots of angular riffs. There's a doomier presence to it. It has an ominous vibe. There's some like cool phaser effects on the guitars. And there is just an absolutely gross breakdown on that song. And this is one of the few songs in here where Paul is not doing the vocals. In fact, he has Malt Garrick as a guest vocalist on here, which I really wasn't familiar with the name. He's in a band called Sijin. I'm not familiar with them, but I am familiar with the band that he was in, Necros Christos, which I really enjoy that band. And his vocals in particular just sound extra just cavernous and just bleak. Like this song is just menacing as hell.
I mean, we're talking heavy, gross, like straight incantation, doom. But then again, the ebb and flow I was talking about, because then right after it gets heavy and brutal, you're back into like tribal drums, and you're back into really like kind of relaxed passages, and it gets more proggy again. I'm telling you, there's a lot of like cynic and later death worship going on here. All in all, the whole song is just really weighted. Like This is a very oppressive, dark jam through and through.
Basically, it's huge. And that is a way to describe this album in general. This is, I would say, easily their most ambitious. It is somehow a little bit less technical, like a little bit more riff-oriented when it comes down to the, just like flat-out death metal sections on here. But it's also more grand in terms of the scope. Like, there's just more going on, but it's also somehow like their catchiest release. There are riffs in here that are just flat-out hooky, and they're not necessarily like overly technical. Nothing feels like too lavish or pretentious. Everything kind of sits well, and some of that is also due to the mix on here because the production is wonderful.
Yeah, it's an Arthur Risk production, and I think he nailed it. I think they got exactly the sound they wanted out of this record. Again, huge. I mean, we're talking about being in space here, and just like very lush, warm synths, and the drums. I'll get into the drum work later, but the drums have this really like rich analog tone to them. Like nothing sounds poppy or crisp. It's got a little bit of a fuzz over it. The vocals sit really well in the mix. They're at a midpoint or they're way far off in the distance. Like, I don't know. I think they just nailed this massive sound that they were going for.
And we haven't even really touched much on the second track, The Message, which again, as I said, like the middle portion of each one of these songs is where it really changes. And this is probably the most different track on the album in terms of Tablet 2 on The Message. It sounds like a tribute to, again, Pink Floyd's Animals, and maybe even like a little bit of like Robin Trower, like Bridge of Sighs.
Yeah.
It is the most mellow track by far. In fact, there are no harsh vocals on this track at all. And there have been like clean vocals that have popped up on this album, like they're more chanted refrains.
Yeah.
More ominous sounding than it is like, like super tuneful. But here, I feel like Paul is like channeling a bit of Roger Waters. It's kind of got that gruff, kind of bluesy kind of vibe to it. Most of the guitars are clean. There are some like heavier sections. Like it comes in, pretty energetic, but it's like a proggy energetic. Like, again, like a lot of like Rush-isms on there. And the lush synths, they kind of sit back in the mix a little bit.
Yep.
I absolutely love the sound of them, and everyone on here played synths, I believe. I think everyone's listed as a synth player. They also had Nicholas Malmquist of the band Hollis to actually help them out in terms of all the synth work on here, which apparently they needed even more synths. There's so many synths in here, but again, it's not intrusive. It doesn't take over the song. They are used excellently for atmosphere, leads, great harmonies, and there's some sections on here that honestly sound a bit like Dream Theater too. But a lot of this kind of harks back to this just bluesy, spacey kind of sound. It's honestly one of my favorite tracks.
It's got a nice swing groove to it, and it's just very relaxed, and the whole time you're just kind of like, yeah. And
I wasn't like that at all.
I was. I don't care.
There are some other interesting surprises on here, too, which, I was kind of ready for them after the first half of this album. The Message Tablet 1 has some of the most pretty, lush melodies on the entire album. Like, it's still very intense. Like, there's a lot of, like, flat-out death metal drumming, blast beats, really cool syncopated breakdowns, but it is mostly driven by major chords, and then on top of it, you have Paul growling, which adds this very interesting contrast. Like, it kind of musically butts heads a little bit, but it strangely works. Like, the hooks are so bright and catchy, but I don't know, like it just has like this very weird feel, like, the devil and the angel on your shoulder both like fighting over the aux chord.
And it has that kind of energy to it too, that kind of like right at the clash, when you like putting two magnets together and you can feel the force field kind of in there.
And I like the fact that it kind of like lures you in with lush melodies. And again, it's kind of a pretty song up until you get towards the back half of it where it shows its true ugly tentacled face and just mauls you. It turns into, honestly, one of the heaviest tracks, like more flat-out brutal chugging. Yeah. It completely shifts tracks and reminds you that these guys worship Lovecraftian deities, I think. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it definitely has like this way more sinister feel, so it is like one of the ultimate contrasts on here.
A lot of that song, I think, too, has to do with the drum work, because you have these crazy, insane blasts underneath these very, again, pretty, lush melodies, and the melodies are moving much slower than the drum work is. I don't know, it was a ride that I wasn't necessarily expecting.
And what's a more proggy album without a giant closer? The last part of the message, Tablet 3, the longest track of the album at 11 minutes and 28 seconds, and it is pretty much like my entire record collection, like they did a tribute to it. It is all over the place. Like, it opens up with thrash riffs, like 80s thrash and speed metal.
Yep.
It's fast-paced. It's still got, like, more death metal vocals, but the riffs themselves, like, sound like stuff you would hear on, like, old Slayer albums and Sodom and stuff like that. Then it curtails into a heavy death metal breakdown, and then out of nowhere comes this hand drum tribal section with lush, clean melodies and more clean vocals, like it's sort of a chanted refrain, and then it just goes headlong into another giant death metal section. This one has probably like the most transitions on it, and it's not just because it's the longest song, it's because this whole front half of the song is just crazy with insane riffs and just, again, like contrasting dynamics in terms of like the different influences they're pulling. This is one hell of a closer.
One of my favorite leads is in this track, too. Actually, there's not a whole lot of leads on this record. I only counted 2. But the lead in this last track, in the Message Tablet 3, is beautiful. And really, the ending of that song, too, it's got a gradual fade out of all this melodic beauty. And to be honest, there were points in there where I really felt like I was at a live show.
Yeah.
Like, it's got that kind of vibe to it. Just imagine standing in the crowd and you've imbibed some substances and you're just like, wow. Like, I could see watching this at Red Rocks, to be honest.
The whole back half of that is honestly like one of the coolest parts because the way it builds, there's like epic synths. Like, it builds to like a grand crescendo, and how they did the fade out I think is really cool because it's not just a standard fade out. It kind of muffles the song as it goes on, and then underneath this layer of synths and then waves and thunder kind of builds, and you get this nice calm, which definitely contrasts the end of the Stargate, because the Stargate ends in this like spiraling void. They fade it out, but everything's getting extra warbled and kind of like phaser, the panning back and forth, like, oh god, we made it to the center of the black hole. I'll just sit here and have my body pulled apart atom by atom. So yeah, this album is absolutely just intense and loaded with amazing songwriting. And I mean, the overall experience, I feel like someone dosed me and played Pink Floyd and Morbid Angel at the same time. And it's like, are you maintaining? Are you doing good? Like, no, I'm not. I can feel my brain sweating. And throughout all of this, it's very smooth. Like, it's very catchy. I fucking love this. The only thing I found on here, most minor thing that just was like, on here, was just one moment on Tablet 3 of the Message where it transitions out of that tribal drum clean part, and there's just one bit where they kind of like harmonize like the death metal section with one of the clean sections, and it feels like a weird overlap.
Yeah, it feels like, I don't know if they meant to do it. It's the only part of this entire record that doesn't necessarily fit, and it only happens in like, what, 2-3 seconds? You're just like, wait a minute, what was that? They never revisit it. It's never touched again. It's never presented in that format. And it sounds, even for a moment, like the cleans are a little bit louder than the death metal. And that was the only time on the entire record that I found anything remotely wrong.
Outside of that, though, man, this album borders on perfection. Yeah. Like, this was one of the coolest listens I've had this year. I know we've said that a lot, but I absolutely mean it. This is a solid 4.5 that is traipsing on that 5 boundary. I know, but it's really close. And again, I have a lot of 4.5s that are all potentially 5s this year.
Yeah.
So, oh man, this is problematic. But my God, I think this is the best thing they've released. Like, this album is absolutely hypnotic. It's catchier than hell. And man, if you are an old school prog rock nerd, you are going to love some of these moments, especially these second tablets in each one of these songs. Jam those in particular. Don't worry, there are still tons of death metal in here. The bulk of this is still just absolutely vicious, disgusting, but cosmic and spacey death metal. And yeah, it absolutely works. If you're a giant fan of, yes, Morbid Angel, Pink Floyd, Incantation, and other things that will come up very randomly on a playlist on Spotify or whatever. If you're just a weird listener of all sorts of music and you like it kind of experimental and strange, just check this out. This album is absolutely marvelous. Take it away.
Man, once again, rest in peace to my year-end list. It's a very, very strong 4.5. I mean, we are this close to a 5. I feel like if I give this a 5, I have to commit it as number 1 for the year, and I can't do that yet. There's so much, but this record is absolutely killer. Some of the best songwriting I think Blood Incantation has ever done ever. The contrast between disgustingly heavy and beautiful, lush, proggy moments. I don't think anybody executes this well, this level of skull-crushing death metal with Pink Floyd and Yes. Like, it just interweaves so masterfully. Like, there's no way to really tell you other than to say, listen to it.
Honestly, this is what Opeth should have done with Heritage. Like, hey, you can have all the 70s prog rock you want. Just give us the death metal, too.
Yeah, if you love Atheist, Cynic, Death, Nile, Incantation, Pink Floyd, Yes, and probably, once again, a myriad of other things found in some random playlist, you're going to love this. This likely will not leave my eardrums for a long time. There is zero wasted space in this spacey album. Check it out.
I legit think that, you know, even if some of their detractors listen to this, there might be some turnaround. Like, I just think this is just flat out good music, regardless of how you feel about the band or whatever.
Yep.
Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are still kind of on Patreon because I can't figure out how to delete the account. I'm going to have to actually talk to Miller because I think he's the one that set it up. It happened so damn long ago. But we have memberships now. If you would like to help us out there, all you have to do is click the join button down below. They're only 99 cents. It is only one tier. We will eventually add some more emojis, but you get a free booger troll.
Come on,
oh my gosh, that's amazing. We only have one perk so far because we want to keep this like as, you know, inclusive as possible, but eventually we're going to start doing some members only streams when we get enough members. And I figure like we need like 25 or so to really kind of justify that just yet. But yeah, that's the new way to support us. That definitely helps us pay for StreamYard too, because StreamYard's prices are going up.
Yeah.
So we would appreciate it if you guys would consider it. You know, feel no pressure to do so. We appreciate everything you guys do for us anyway. But if you do want to help out, click the join button down below. And of course, we still have thrallsmetal.com. We still have t-shirts, both old and new. The old ones are still discounted, provided we have your size. And we even have hats. So if you're looking for that, that is also down below.
And as always, tons of stuff going on at Thralls of Metal, album reviews, discography rankings, multiple discussion panels, pretty much unending segments at this point, discussion forums. We get all metal all the time. That's what we do here at Thralls of Metal, but we do it all because of you guys. Thank you to all of our family, our friends, our subscribers, everybody that's helped us out along the way. This thing just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and we love it.
That's what she said.
Anyway, yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, you guys absolutely roll. Tons of content coming your way. So one more big thank you because of all your awesomeness, and we will catch you later.